When it comes to creating vector artwork, when it comes to creating complex selections, it really is tough to beat the pen tool in Affinity, but it does take some practice. The problem for many people is they don't take the time to get over that learning curve. They don't learn the tips and tricks and techniques that I'm going to teach you today. Watch this video. I'm going to make sure you can get this tool to do exactly what you want. So let's dive in and let's learn how to master the pen tool in Affinity. Okay, let's talk about the pen tool in Affinity. So the pen tool by default creates a vector shape, but you can also use it for making selection. And yes, I know in Affinity there are things like the object selection tool. There's some automatic selection tools under here like select subject. So there's some things that will automatically find selections using that AI technology, but you'd be surprised how often you still need a tool like the pen tool to select a specific area that you can't quite select another way. And also there are going to be situations where you just need it when you're creating vector shapes in vector artwork. So let's get into the pen tool. So first of all, where do you find this pen tool? Well, you're going to find it under most of these tabs up here, and it might be in slightly different places, depending on whether you're under the Pixel Studio, the Vector Studio. So here under the Pixel Studio by default, here it is down here. So the pen tool, if we come under the Vector Studio, it is nested right here. And if we come back under Pixel, we see under this Pixel Studio, the pen tool is nested with the node tool. Now the pen tool and the node tool go hand in hand, which we're going to talk about as we get into this lesson. But let's come under the Vector Studio here, and under the Studio, you're going to see the P keyboard shortcut P for the pen tool, and then if we come up here, the node tool is separated up here, and that is the A keyboard shortcut. So P for pen tool, A for the node tool. We're going to use those to jump back and forth, and that's going to be super important because these go hand to hand. But let's start with the basics. So I'm going to come down here and select the pen tool. I also could have used that P keyboard shortcut. And so now I have my pen tool selected. Now something you might want to check right up here is you could be in pixel view mode or vector view mode. I'm going to switch over to vector view mode. Basically, if you're in vector view mode, you're going to see those crisp edges that you get with an infinitely scalable vector graphic. If you're in pixel mode, it's actually going to give you a rasterized preview. So if you wanted to see what it's going to look like if you rasterize it later, you could switch over to that. And that sometimes can render a little faster. But really, if you want those crisp, clean edges, stay in this vector view mode. So here with this pen tool selected, we'll notice that up here, we have a fill color, and then we have an outline color. We have some other options up here, so you get a contextual bar just like you do with every tool where you have different tool options up here, and we're going to be talking about that, but let's just start by clicking with our left mouse button and make a few clicks on screen to see the sort of thing that's going to happen here. So anytime we click, you'll notice it puts down a point, and those points that it puts down are called nodes. That's where we're going to get into the node tool. So that terminology, anytime you're putting down a point with the pen tool, that is just a node. So I can click once, and then if I just click again, it's going to sort of draw a line in between, and I can click again. And we're getting this line here, and it actually does have a fill color, but since I already have a white background and my fill color is white, we're just seeing white there. But if I were to come up here and click on this, and let's select a different color here, so I'll just make it a green like that. Now we suddenly see, because we have a fill color here, and we have a line color, as I click and build out that shape, we're getting not only a stroke here, but we're also getting a fill color. Now, anytime you come back to the point you start with and you hover over that, then you'll notice how your little icon changes from this plus to this circle, indicating you're going to close your path. And there, now we have a closed shape, which we created with the pen tool. So when we just did one mouse click, I'm going to start a new shape now. One mouse click and release, one mouse click and release. Then we're just getting these sharp corner points. And if you have a sharp corner point, you're going to see this square icon representing the node. Now, if I were to click and hold as I put down a point and then drag out, you'll notice I get these handles, and suddenly that becomes this circular point instead of a square node. Now we get a circular node, and this is a smooth node because I'm holding and I'm using these handles to sort of drag out the shape. Now these handles sort of control the direction the line's going to go, and you can almost think of the two little endpoints coming out of my handles here as magnets, and they're sort of pulling any lines that are close by towards them. So once I go and release that, then I can go ahead and I can click another point. Again, if I just click once, it's going to be one of those sharp corner points. But if I click and hold as I'm putting down the point, then I have the ability to put in this curved point. So this is how we're building out our shapes as we come in here and we use the pen tool. Now, the pen tool, I will say, The more you use it, the better you're going to get. It is definitely something that takes practice. But I'm going to give you a lot of tips that's really, really going to speed up the learning curve for you, because there's some smart practices you can do with the pen tool. There's some keyboard shortcuts, some things you can do with that node tool in concert with the pen tool that's just going to make your life a lot easier. So we're going to get into some examples. You're going to see how there are different strategies for using the pen tool and the node tool, different ways you can do it. I'm going to tell you what I like to do best, but then you can decide what works for you. But I'll give you enough good tips that you are going to get over that learning curve that a lot of people struggle with. Now, before we move on and go through those examples, right now I just want to point out that this shape here is called a curve by default, and this one's called a polyline. So why are they labeled differently here? Well, that's just what Affinity is doing by default, and it's calling this one a polyline simply because it only has these sharp corner points, where this one has some of those rounded nodes. If I were to come under my node tool here and just click on this and find one of these nodes here, and if I do like an alt click to change this point here to a rounded point, we'll notice how the name over here changes the curve. So don't get caught up whether it says curve, whether it says polyline. They're all vector graphics. You're going to start to see and notice when Affinity is just changing that name, maybe because the type of nodes that are in that shape. Now, as I mentioned, by default, when you're dragging out a path like this with the pen tool, you are creating a vector shape. So up here we have a fill color, which we can turn off. So if we click on this, you have the option for turning this off. You can come in here, you can change the color of your fill. You could even come in here and put in a gradient, and there's some other options here. Let me go ahead and insert this linear gradient. So there's some other options. We're going to go over some of these, and not every single one, but I'm going to go over the ones that I think make sense to know. But we'll come back to some of these. I just want to point out that yes, you can put in a fill color, and then you can have a stroke, or you can turn off a stroke. So again, you can click on the stroke option, you can turn it off, or let's turn it back on. Let's make it a different color. Let's give it this color stroke, and then maybe we want it to be a lot thicker, so we can come in here, we can make it a lot thicker. There are even options in here where we could come in, we could click on these options, we could say, hey, I actually want this to be a dotted line instead. How thick do I want that to be? We can make it thicker, we can increase the size of the gap here. So right now the gap, maybe we need to make it bigger, so let's make this number bigger, let's make this number even bigger, so then we have sort of a staggered gap where there's differential space in between the gaps. So there are lots and lots of options. I'm not going to get into every single option, but just know there really is a lot you can do with this vector shape. But for right now, I'm actually going to just turn this stroke off. So we'll come in here under this stroke option right here, click on it again, and use this option to just turn it off. So now we just have this basic shape, and I'm going to go ahead and fill it with a solid color. It's a little easier to see as you're learning with a solid color. So let's go ahead and put this back to a solid color. Actually have to have it selected. There we go. Now let's just put this back to a solid color. So come under there and turn it back to this blue. Now let's work an example. I'm actually going to throw out these two shape layers we created. So I'll click one, shift click the other, and I'm just going to hit the delete key on my keyboard to throw that out. Now below that, I actually have this photo layer. So with this photo layer here, let me just grab that pen tool again, and I'm just going to put down some really quick points. So again, now by default, a lot of times when you're drawing out, you'll have a fill color. So you'll have something like this, you'll have a stroke, not at all what I want. And I don't want to see it as I draw it out. It's making it harder for me to see the shape I'm creating. So a lot of times what I'm going to do is when I start to use the pen tool, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to turn off the fill and I'm going to turn off the stroke. I can adjust those after the fact, after I have the shape that I want. Now sometimes you might want to see it as you drag it out, but a lot of cases I do not. So I will come in there and turn those off. That way I can see the shape I'm creating a little bit better. Now, if for some reason you happen to click off something and click onto something else, and then you come back to that curve that you started, now if I were to grab my pen tool and click again, it's actually going to start a new curve. I don't want to do that. So Control Z to undo. I can see this one. So when you're doing this, if you want to just rejoin a path that you started and it wants to create a new one, all you're going to do is hold down the Control key on your keyboard, then you're going to hover over that endpoint there, and when you see your cursor turn to black, you see it's a white arrow and then it becomes black. Then if I click on that node, now suddenly I'm rejoined to that node and I can continue to create this path. So I'm just going to draw out a basic path here around my soccer player. Again, not making this anything that interesting. We're just going to use this as an example. Okay, so now I have this shape created. Now, as we know, this is a vector shape, so you can come in here, you could add a solid color. I don't want to do that. What I want to do is make use of this shape. So let's go ahead and turn off this solid color, and we're just using this shape here. Now, the other two options you'll notice up here is you see it says mask and it says selection. So as I stated, by default, when you're using the pen tool, you're creating a vector shape, but you can also just use it to make selections. So if I were to come over here now and hit the selection option, watch what's going to happen to this curve right here. So I'm going to hit the selection, we're going to get those marching ants, and you'll notice that curve disappeared. We no longer have that vector curve we just created. Now we just have this selection. Now I can hit Control Z to undo that, and we'll see that, hey, selection goes away and the curve comes back. So that's the selection option. And if I were to choose selection and create a selection like this, now I'm on this photo layer. And if you've watched some of the other videos I have here on this channel, learning series on Affinity, you know, hey, mask, I can create a mask. So with this layer selected, I could come down, create this mask icon. Now we have a mask. So we have this mask here attached to this layer. If I hit the Alt button so I can see the mask directly, we can see that yes, that is just white showing what is gonna appear, and then black is what is being masked out. And again, I just created that shape using the pen tool. Now, I've thrown away that vector shape. This is black and white because this right now, this is just a pixel-based mask. Right now, so I can come in here, I can run some filters on this, I can draw with white and black, I can draw with gray, I can do lots of stuff working on this mask, but then I'm working back in pixel mode because I threw away the vector and I just created that selection first and then I created the mask. Let me hit Control Z a couple times. This will become obvious what I'm trying to show you here in a second. So Control Z, Control Z, Control Z, just getting back to where we have our path again. Now, if instead of doing that selection option, I instead clicked mask, it's going to take this vector shape and it's going to use it as a clipping mask, and it's still going to preserve the vector shape itself if we still want to make edits to it. Now, anytime you're creating a mask like this and you use this option, you have to be above the layer you want to mask. So I have the photo layer below, that's what I want. So now I'm going to click this mask option and boom, suddenly we see we have this clipping mask applied. But there's something a little different about this. If I alt click on this clipping mask, we'll see that the mask itself is just the shape. So we actually have a editable vector shape still here. It's different from a raster mask where we're only going to have those white pixels where things are showing and then black pixels where it's not showing. We actually just see the extra white here is because I actually have a background set up, a white background in this document. If I come up under settings, document setup and transparent background, I can actually turn it off. So we actually see we just have this shape here. And so let me come back here. And so this is still an editable shape. So I can click down on my mask. I don't have to be actually seeing the white portion of it. So I didn't use that Alt Option click. I just clicked on the mask. We can see how all these are still nodes right here. And so I can actually grab my node tool, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but I can actually grab this and I can still work with and make adjustments to this mask, right? So now on the fly, I can come in here and I can change the shape of what's being masked using those vector tools. So the pen tool and anything else where I work with this type of vector graphic. So again, just wanted you to know that you can use a vector image like this as a mask, and when you do, it's working differently than when you have a pixel-based mask, because now we're working with a vector shape. So these are important differences to know because obviously the pros and cons of both vector mask and pixel-based mask. But with the pen tool, you could actually create either one because you create your shape, and then if you wanted to turn it into a selection itself, you could turn it into a selection, and then you'd be going to a pixel-based mask if you then chose mask after that using this mask icon down here. But if you skip that selection part and you just started with your vector shape and then directly use it as a mask, then you're creating a vector mask, okay? So important differences to know. Okay, let's work some examples now because that's the only way you're really gonna learn the fine control and tricks you need to know to get really good with this pen tool. So let's imagine I want to sort of create a path that follows the lines of this wave here. How would I do that with the pen tool? Okay, so pen tool selected. First of all, if you come up here, sometimes this will show as nothing, and then when you click and you drag, suddenly it restores the default setting up here, the last thing you use. So even though it's not showing what you want here, just know once you start to drag out your shape, you can always come in and adjust this later. So if I wanted to up the thickness of this a little bit, I could still do that. So it doesn't really matter what it is when you first start. You're just gonna have to pay attention to those settings once you actually start to draw out your curve. So let me just hit Control Z to undo that. I'll click one more time, so I'm gonna click down here to start. And then my next point I wanna put right here. Of course, if I just do a corner point, for both of these. That's going to be straight line. I don't want that, so let me hit Control Z. So what I'm going to do instead is click first point and then click and hold with this next point. And click and hold and start to drag out my curve here, the handles, so I can make that line sort of follow the shape of the wave. Now, here's the problem though. Go ahead and release now. What happens when I want to put my next point? So let's say I want to put my next point right here, so I can click and hold, but whoa, that's not going to work because I have this handle pulling it up here, and then I have this one pulling it down, so I get this line that changes shape. That's not what I want. So what are my options? Let me hit Control Z to undo this, because there are keyboard shortcuts you can use to start to access that node tool on the fly and make adjustments as you're dragging out your shape. So I can click once here, and then I can click and hold for my second point, but then I have a bunch of keyboard modifiers that can help. First of all, if I hold down the space bar, then I can move this node all around. I can move it, I can get it exactly where I want, I can release the space bar, and then I still have my left mouse button held down, so I can still adjust these handles. So let me get the handles exactly as I want, but then before I release my mouse button, what I'm going to do is hold down the Alt key. Now with the Alt key held down, now suddenly I can change the direction of this handle. Okay, so we want this next line to flow out this way. So I might put it somewhere like this, and then I'm going to go ahead and release my left mouse button, and then I'm going to come over here and put in my next point, and again, drag it down, get it exactly as I want it, and again, hold down the Alt key. Left mouse button still held down this whole time. Now the Alt key, go ahead and drag this down. Go ahead. Now I'm going to release my mouse button when I have this handle where I want it. So every time you have the point exactly where you want it, the handle where you want it, that's when you're finally going to release the left mouse button. Okay, left mouse button to put down this next point. Drag this down, and let's say I got it like right here. Now let's say before I actually use that Alt trick to change the shape and direction of this next handle, what if I accidentally release my mouse button? Okay, so now I have this one stuck up here. How do I go back and fix that after the fact? Well, if I hold down the Control and the Alt key together, then I can drag specifically this point after the fact. So using the Control and the Alt key together, I can drag this after the fact, put it down here, do something like that. I can even see that, hey, this point isn't exactly where I want it to be. It's still the highlighted point, so I can actually use my keyboard shortcuts, just my arrow keys, and nudge this down. I can still come in here, use Control and Alt together, drag this handle, put it anywhere I want, and then I can put in my next point. So using this Alt key, this Control key on the fly really gives you a lot of control. But this isn't the only way we can do this. But let me go ahead and finish this out here. So I'll put this one here. I'll drag it out. Again, get it exactly where I want it. Hold down that Alt key. Still haven't released my left mouse button. Get this exactly where I want it. Then I'm going to release my left mouse button. Oops, didn't mean to do that. So I meant to release my mouse key. So the reason why I'm making some of these mistakes is just because they're easy to make, and that's why I'm going to show you another method that you might end up preferring. So let me hit Control Z to undo that last point. Let me put this point in here again. We're going to drag it out to where we want it. Remember, Alt key, drag this out, and now release the left mouse button, not the Alt key, the left mouse button. Now that point is put down. I can actually use my space bar to pan over, put this last point in here, just like that, and boom. So now we sort of have that line following this other line really pretty well. I did a pretty good job with that. Now, that's not the only way I can do that. So understanding these Alt and Control keyboard modifiers are going to be crucial, but there are other ways to do this. Okay, we saw with that last example how you can hold down your left mouse button in combination sometimes with holding down a keyboard shortcut or modifier, and that can help you get the job done, change the direction of those handles. But to me, sometimes holding down the mouse button and those keyboard shortcuts, it can get a little tricky. So I'm going to show you another method that's sort of become my preferred method just because I think it's a little easier. So I'm going to do again, I'm going to start with the pen tool, but this time all I'm really worrying about is putting down a point anytime the curve changes direction. So it's bending up this way, but then when it starts to bend back the other way, I'll put down a point there. And again, I'm just putting down corner points at this. I'm not worrying about clicking and holding to get those control handles. I'm just putting down a point anytime this changes direction. So that's going to be the crest of the wave. Anytime it changes direction, I'm going to put down a point. Now, the whole key to this method is we're switching between the pen tool and the node tool. Now the pen tool is the P keyboard shortcut, and then if you hit A on your keyboard, it switches to this node tool. And when you have the node tool selected, you sort of get this white pointer here, this cursor, but then you'll notice anytime you hover over a line, you'll see how it changes. And you can actually, with the node tool, click on a node and move a node. So I can move this node around, but you can also click on any point in between, so on the sort of line itself, and you can almost drag it like it's rope. And as you do, you can see the control handles there. Now I see the control handles because this point is selected. If I were to drag here doing the same thing, I'm not going to see the control handles because those points aren't selected. So the reason why I'm telling you this is because whatever you have selected here matters in terms of what you're going to see visually. So you can, even with this tool, this node tool, just grab a selection box, drag, click and drag with your left mouse button, hold, drag it around everything. Then you're seeing all these control handles that exist. And so now we see what's really happening when I just click on this node tool and drag the line. It's actually moving those control handles in unison based on how I'm dragging out this line. So I can just fit this perfectly to the curve, come to the next line segment, fit it perfectly to the curve, come here again and grab on the line again, drag it right here. Now, if at any point in time you sort of lose what you had selected, you might just have to go back and again select everything. You don't have to see these control handles, but if you want to see them, just make sure you see this blue selection sort of icon where you have a node. That lets you know it's selected, and then you're going to see these control handles. Again, if you don't have those selected, you can still move this again. Make sure we're on the right layer. So I lost my layer, come back to the layer. Now these are white, so they're not selected, so I can still use this node tool, but I'm not going to see my control handles. So if I wanted to see the control handles for this point, just make sure I select those, and now I'm going to see those control handles. But using this methodology, it's very easy to come in here and just click on the line itself, and you have a lot of freedom in terms of dragging it around. Now, I can get it to fit pretty much perfectly to these curves here because these curves are changing at a uniform rate. I do not want you to think this method works perfectly fitting to a curve every time, because a lot of times you're going to have a curve where maybe it's bending at 15 degrees, and then suddenly it's a sharper curve. So that's where you sometimes can use this method, but then you also have to add new nodes. So we're going to work through a couple more examples, and I'm just going to continue to show you how we can use this method of switching between the pen tool and the node tool and really use this just for this fine control. Because with this node tool, I can grab a line, I can move the line itself, I can grab one of the nodes itself, I can move the node itself, or I can grab any of my control handles and move the control handles. So it just gives you sort of 3 different degrees of control on how you're shaping your pathway. Okay, so let's take this new method of using the pen tool in combination with the node tool and try to draw a path around this mug. Now this shape is more complicated than what we were dealing with before because that wave had sort of a continuous curve where it was always bending at the exact same angle. Now suddenly we have something here where it's sort of curving here at one rate, and then suddenly there's a sharper curve here, and then it's sort of a less of a curve here, and then there's a sharp curve at the corner, and of course this handle goes out straight and then bends around more. So this is definitely a little bit more complicated than we were doing before, but we're going to try the same method where I'm just going to put down points where I think the rate of the curve changes or the direction of the curve changes. And again, my initial goal is always to use as few points as I can because I always know I can come back and add points later. So let's start just by grabbing the pen tool here, and we're going to come in here and we're going to start putting down points. So I'm going to put down a point maybe right here, just after this sharp part here, sort of right here, and then it sort of changes at the same rate all the way up to like the top here, sort of. So I'm going to put another point there, and I'll come to the other side of this curve here where it bends sharply around the corner. So maybe I'll put a point there. Then I'm going to come over here and put another point here, and then it changes a little bit more rapidly. So right here, it's kind of straight down here, but then we go around this curve here. So put another point there. It's kind of straight out as this sort of bends at the same angle here, but then maybe it's different angle. I'll try putting one down here. I might need another point in there, but I'll try one there. And then actually there's a curve here, and then it actually bends back the other way. So I'll put a point there. And then we'll come down here, and then I got to get around this corner here. This is sort of the same, so I might need an extra point here, but I'll just go ahead and actually connect it up here. Now I also noticed that maybe this line is a little thicker than I want it to be, so at any point in time you can come back as you're drawing out, you can change your fill color. I like it being, set to just opacity. So transparency, I should say, so I can see through, so it's not blocking. But then I'll come in here and take this thickness. Let's take this down a little bit just to make that line a little bit less distracting. Now, if you like that, you can keep that, and you can even turn it off altogether, and then you'll just see the blue line. So maybe I'll actually just do that. So that way, actually, we're seeing the blue path itself. Now we're really seeing, how closely we're fitting to the shape itself. Now, remember, with this method, now we're going to take our node tool, so A on the keyboard shortcut, and we jump to this node tool. So if I hit P, see how we jump back to the pen tool? A jumps to that node tool. Then when we have the node tool, I can just sort of come grab these handles and pull them out. Now, I may need to zoom in to get this, more precise. So for now, I'm going to roughly get it in the right shape, and then I'll zoom in even more. But we see I didn't quite get it there, but I'm just going to roughly take this, and you can see how very quickly, using this methodology, we can get a pretty good fit. Now, I'm going to come in and zoom in if I want to make things even more accurate, but for now, I'm just doing this initial step where I'm just getting things close, and then I'll zoom in as I need to. But for now, I'm just going to get this and come in here and get it so it's looking pretty good. So this is a little weird there. Let's drag this one down. You can see this one here, I'm definitely going to need more points because I just can't get it to fit the shape here because it's sort of more drastic here, and then the curve slows down. So I'm definitely going to need more points there, but we'll come back to that. So I'll grab this side and drag this out. So that looks pretty good. So other than the bottom here where I need a few more points, I've done a pretty good job. We can see this isn't quite fitting perfectly. I missed a spot up here, I think. So let's grab this and let's slide that out. So we might have to come in and make some small adjustments. And obviously we might have to cut out the handle here if we want to cut out the handle. But very quickly, we're able to use this new method and get it fitting pretty good. Now, for spots where we want to sort of get in even closer, I can hit Z on my keyboard to zoom in. Let's zoom in even more. Let's jump back to that pen tool. We're seeing that. Now let's grab our node tool again. So I'm going to hit A to jump back to the node tool. Now we can come in here and we can work on improving this. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned with the node tool, we can left click and pull this line here, right? So I'm just pulling this. But if you have a situation like this where it's just not quite working, you need more points, then you can very easily add in a new point. So first I'm going to try to center this so it's sort of equal on each side. And then what I'm going to do is come over, instead of left clicking and holding to pull the line down, I'm just going to click once. And when I do, we'll see it puts down another new point. So I added a new node. So now I can use this node and I can come in here and I can start to reshape. Now, I can put it right there. And now I can actually individually come in here and start to use the control handles. Now this is sort of important if we really want to get the next level of control. Right now, as you'll see, if I go in here and drag this, you'll see that because this is a circular point, a smooth node point, that means when I move one control handle, the other control handle is going to move in unison because they form this straight line. And that means they're connected. You can't drag one without dragging the other side. So I may need to do something about this. Now, I'm going to show you how to do that, but before we do that, this might be okay for this point. The real problem I have right here is this handle here, pulling in here. I clearly don't want it pointing in that direction. So let's hit A, make sure we have our node tool. Let's click on that node. We can see this one handle goes way up this way. That's fine. But then this handle we want to change. So remember, we have the ability just to click directly on this node and drag it out. So let's start by fixing this point. Let's get it to where we want it, something like this. Now you'll notice at some point in time, it wants to snap. So if you ever have a node where the handles are going different directions like this, and they're moving independently, and you want to be able to move them together in unison again, what you're going to do is move one of the node points back until you get a straight line, and you'll feel it snap into place like that. And you'll see the point change from a square to a circle, square to a circle. And then if you release at that point, now when you come in here and you start moving them one again, now they're moving in unison, okay? So that's the trick for getting them moving back in unison again. Now, if that's not quite right and you need to adjust one, you can still come in and adjust one. But for now, I think maybe in unison might be okay if I just drag this one out even farther on this end. And then of course, if I needed to sort of break that, that's where you hold down the Alt key on your keyboard. And then when you're holding down that Alt key, that's Alt on Windows or Options on Mac, then you can split that and have it again so they're working in different directions. So maybe something like that, okay? Now that I have that in place, I think this point here is going to be okay. Then over on this side, let's zoom in over on this other side here. Again, let's get in real close. Let's hit P to get to that pen tool. And now when you're zoomed in, you can see that we have a lot of imperfections here. So when you're doing this, if you zoom in even farther, you can be even more precise. So it just really comes down to what level of precision you want. But if I hit A to get back to my node tool, I can easily take any of these points and just bump them out a little bit, just so we're better fitting right on the line. I can move them around just to position them exactly where I need them, grab control handles, make these little adjustments here like that. Grab this one, bring it down like that. Grab this handle, pull it in like that. And so again, you can just come in here and you can make these adjustments. So this point, I think I'll put right there. Let's take this control handle. Let's just get that lined up really good. This one here, let's bump this out ever so slightly like that. So you can start to make all of these adjustments. This one here, of course, I can drag in like this. Now, if you want to keep nice, smooth, rounded lines, then it's important to keep these circular points. Sometimes to fit a shape, you're going to have to break them. Just know when you do break them, and so if I hold the Alt key down and I do something like this, then I can get this shape to fit a little bit better here, but then suddenly I may have a point here where it's not a perfect smooth line. So just remember, if you're trying to stay perfect and smooth, you're trying to maintain these circular points as much as you can. When you start to introduce square points, you do have at that point a spot where the angle of the curve is changing at a different rate. So that's going to maybe make it so it's not quite as smooth. Okay, I'm going to hold down the Alt key again. Let's just drag this out. Let's get it something like this. And now, if you run into a situation like this where you can't quite get it to fit here, well, then you have a couple options. You can grab a node itself. Maybe repositioning the node itself would help you set it up a little bit better, or you can always add in more nodes. So I'm going to reposition that. I'll grab this. I'll bring this out. Let's take this one here, hold down the Alt key, change the angle slightly. Let's pull this one out a little bit. So again, not perfect, but you can continue to come in here and just tweak it slightly. And again, it does come down to how perfect do you need it to be. I'm going to hold down the Alt key here just to change the angle of this one, bring it over something like this here. And again, if I thought I needed another point, I could always put down a point here just by clicking on the line and then slide this one out slightly. So you can add more nodes as you need them. I think less nodes is better if you can use less nodes, but when you find you need to add more nodes, it's okay to put another one in there. That's what they're there for. Okay, so we're going to go ahead, and again, I'm not trying to get this perfect because we're zoomed in very close. Let's just zoom out a little bit, but we're going to try to make sure we have a really nice curve fitting around this. So again, this one here maybe needs to come out slightly, so we'll move it out slightly. We'll come up here. We'll take this one, we'll bump it out ever so slightly. Now, this here I can tell isn't quite a straight angle here, so let's pull this one out. I actually think maybe I want these 2 points, this one and this one, to be in unison. So I'm going to let this one slide back in until I get that circle point again, because I don't want this to become sort of a point that changes direction here. So I'm going to put it something like this, and that may mean I need to come up here. Whoops, hit the wrong key. So you can always hit A to get back to that node tool, and then spacebar to reposition. And I just want that to be a straight point, so I'm just going to go like that and then sort of nudge in a little bit like this. So you can always do this slight adjusting. And again, that looks pretty good there. Let's grab this point here. Let's just take it out a little farther like that. Let's take this one here. Let's pull this up and out a little bit farther like that. So again, you have all these this control. And then maybe I might need another point here, so I could just drop one in just so I can pull this part up just a tiny bit like that. So all these small refinements. Now, you can see right here, if I hit the space bar, it switches from my node tool just to my hand tool so I can reposition, but it also lets me just see underneath what's going on here if my sort of path line is blocking my view. And you can see there is this slight change in direction here. So even though I do have a slight change in direction here, I think that is kind of true to the shape of this mug, so I think I'm okay with that. So we'll put a little adjustment there. We'll come in here. This does have a slight curve there. This here, I think maybe I want this one to be a rounded point, so I'll bring that up slightly. Again, understanding what this circle means here, that these are in unison. I can still make one longer and the other shorter, but they're flowing out in the same direction. So the line is going to be nice and smooth as we go through there. So something like this. This looks pretty good. Maybe adjust this slightly. Again, I'm going to try to maintain this circle point here. So maybe I'll just put in another point here and bump it out ever so slightly. And you'll notice too, when you add in new points like this, it will sometimes then adjust the control handles on an adjacent point and make it longer and shorter, just to keep a nice smooth shape there. So this is all looking pretty good. I can make these adjustments. Again, if I need another point here, I can just boom, drop in a point. That way I can snug this in a little closer. So you can see just by coming in here, adding additional points, using all these methods we have now, you can really easily come in here and get this nice shape. So if I were to take this right now, we could do something like add a fill. So let's come in here and let's make this a blue mug. So I'm just going to grab a solid color, something like that. And now I could still come in here and knock out that handle. So let me show you how we would knock out the handle. So let's go ahead and turn this down a little bit. Or I could temporarily bring the cup up layer, the picture of the cup up above it. So let me do that, and then let me hit Z to zoom in a little bit more. And now I'm going to cut out this shape here, and I'm going to cut it out from the blue shape we just created. So again, grab my pen tool, and really want you to start thinking about, you know, the rates of angles here in your curve and where it changes direction. So this curve to this curve here is pretty uniform, but then it straightens out till about right here. Then suddenly we have it bending this way, we have it bending that way. Then this is a pretty constant rate of change around here to here maybe, but then it slows down a little bit. Maybe I need a point here, maybe I don't. Let's just come connect it up, and then we'll see if we need another point. So again, connect it up at the end, and then zoom in a little closer just to be a little bit more precise. Hit A to get back to that node tool. Let me grab and pull out at this end. That looks pretty good. Let's grab this one, come straight up there. That looks pretty good. Let's take this, pull it up there. That's looking pretty good. Let's grab and pull down here. That's fitting pretty well. Let's grab and pull this down here. So again, this just takes a little bit of practice. Now something like this, where I see it's like this, I'm like, okay, I think I need another point here. Let's pull this one over on this side. Let's reshape that a little bit. Now I've got some weird stuff going on here, so let me just grab in and pull this out. And this one here, if you have a control handle like this, let me zoom in closer, because this is another important thing I wanted to show you. Hit A to get back to that node tool. I have something right here where if you ever have a control handle and you just want to get rid of it, let me just actually show you by creating a new path real quick. We're going to come back to this path, but let me just create a new path real quick. So real quick over here, let's put down a point, let's put down a point, let's make this a curved point, let's put down a point, let's put down another point. Okay, so now I'm going to hit A to get to my node tool. And I'm going to come over here and start clicking, and we've got this node tool. If you ever have a situation where you want to get rid of a handle, well, if I hold down the Alt key and click on a handle, it gets rid of it. If I hold down the Alt key, this is Alt on Windows, this would be Option on Mac, using the node tool, you'll notice how it turns black like that, and we got the little circle. That's going to get rid of it. Now, if I click on the node itself, holding down the Alt key, it's going to make it a rounded point like that again. So just using that Alt keyboard shortcut or the Option one, we can very quickly just cycle through. and we can get rid of a handle, we can get rid of a handle, we can bring both handles back. Okay, so that's something important to notice. And also, if you were to hold down the Alt key and the Control key together, then we can come in while we're using the node tool and we can independently do one. Control key, actually all I need is the Control key, right? So if I come in here and let me just actually Alt, click on this one to make it like this. If I were to use the Control key, it moves together. If I wanted to break that, that's where I need the Alt key. And I can change the direction of just one at a time. Okay, so learning what Alt does and Control does, sometimes you're going to get a little confused, jumbled in your head, even as someone who uses this tool a lot. Sometimes that still happens to me, but just take a moment, try one. Hit Control Z on your keyboard if you need to undo a step. Try the other keyboard modifier, because that Alt key, that Control key, that's really going to be the key. And then jumping back and forth between the pen tool and the node tool, it's going to allow you to really make the changes you need to make. Now let's go back and find this curve we were creating before. So down here I can see here's that handle I was working on. So let's come back and let's keep finishing that up there. So let me just come in here and drag out this side here. And actually let's zoom out a little bit. So zoom, boom, and then back to that node tool. And then as we're dragging this out here, if I notice, okay, it's fitting pretty good here, but not up here. This is where, again, you can just click once to add in a new point. I'll bring this one out. Then I clearly need to make an adjustment here. But then again, I have too much going on here. So at any point in time, if you have a point that's just gotten a little too wonky and you just want to start over that area, you can click on it, have it selected, and then hit the delete key. And it's not going to break your curve. It's just going to get rid of that one point. And then maybe I'll just click to add in a new one. This is a nice smooth point, which is what I want. So I can come in, drag to reposition. Click on this one up here, and let's just make it fit a little bit better, just like that. This one here, let's just drag and reposition this one slightly, and then there we go. So very quickly you can come in here and make these adjustments. Now, I have the shape here. Let's say we want to fill this shape with blue. So let's come in here and let's click on it. And actually it's filled with blue, but I'm hidden below stuff, aren't I? So let's bring this up. You see how this is below my actual picture layer here. So let's come in here and let's make sure we have it up where we can see it. So let's drag it up above the picture. Let's take this one here, the cup itself. Let's drag it above the picture. You know, let's give these different colors. I guess they are different colors, so that works. We have a stroke on this one here. We don't need the stroke, but let's go ahead and turn that off. So I want to take this handle area and I want to cut it out from what I have below it. Well, with this handle area above the cup, I can click on that layer and then I can click on the layer below. So I'm going to hold down the shift on my keyboard and select both of these. And then with both of these selected, I'm just going to go up here under vector. I'm going to choose geometry and I'm going to choose subtract, because you're paying attention to what shape you have on top and what do you want to do with it. I want to subtract that from the shape below. So geometry, subtract. And then when I do that here, then boom, my curve below suddenly is adjusted with that new shape cut out. So now if I zoom out, we have a very effective image of the mug here. Now, of course, I could still come in here if I wanted to add like a different color or something to represent the opening of this mug. But I think for now, for our purposes, we've done a good job of just demonstrating how you can use this pen tool in combination with that node tool to create really effective, accurate selections and also really smooth, cool vector shapes. Okay, so I think we've covered effective ways for using the pen tool, and that's the most important part of this lesson. But I did promise I'd come back and talk a few of these settings you get under the contextual menu here with the pen tool. Again, I'm not going to talk about all of these, but I will just go over a few things here that might be helpful. So I have a rectangle shape on screen here and then also a line. Right now this rectangle shape is selected. So additional options up here. If I were to come up under this stroke settings here, there actually are a few things that will be helpful to know. So we can control the type of join we have. Right now it's set here as a miter join, so we get this hard, sharp edge, but I could come in here and change it to something like this, or I could come in here and have it be a rounded edge. So we have those options in there. Now let me switch now, and I'm going to actually select this curve over here, which is just this open curve. So let me make sure that's selected so I can see it here on screen. And now when we have the end of a line here that's not connected, we have even more options under here. So now suddenly the cap, right now we can see this is a rounded cap, but we could come in here and we could change it to something like that. And then we could also click this option here and we see it sort of goes beyond the edge. And then if I come come back to this rectangle again, we can see there were a few options in here as well that we didn't talk about. So right in here, we can see right now, it's sort of, here's the path, and then the stroke expands on both sides. So the path is sort of centered in the stroke, but I could switch this up so that the stroke is on the inside of our path. Or if I go to this one, the stroke is on the outside of our path. Now, these may seem like little things, but they could be little things that come into play where you're like, why is it not quite reacting and behaving the way I think it is? Sometimes it's these little options in here. So there are really a fair amount of options in here. Coming back to this line again here, you even have options under here like adding a arrow or something to the start of end of your line. So you could come in here and have it build a circle, have it build a sort of curved arrow, a regular barbed arrow, triangle arrow. So there are some different options in here. Again, I'm not going to go over all of these, but it's important to know you do have options in here you can fool around with. Now, these other options here, smart mode, polygon mode, and then things like converting to sharp points, smooth points, I'm not going to really go over these because I think understanding how the pen tool works and how we can use that node tool in concert with the pen tool, we've really covered that stuff. And I really use the node tool for all these little things and those keyboard shortcuts, so I don't really come up and use these options here. The same is going to be true of some of the options here under the actions panel. Again, it's important to know what break curve, reverse curve is going to do, but this is again where I turn to the node tool. So let me just actually switch over to the node tool. And we saw one of the options under the actions panel on the pen tool was to break a curve. Well, we can actually do that here with the node tool. So if I click on any node tool right now, if I click on this node, we see we can move that around, and that is connected to this line here. However, if we wanted to break this line at that point, then we can see up here that we have options for break curve, close curve. So if I break this apart, boom, suddenly I break that apart, and now we see we have it as two lines. And then if I were to do something like come up here and choose the close curve option, we see it's just connecting it to itself here. It's not reconnecting here, it's just connecting it to itself. So let me hit Control Z. What if I were to grab nodes from both of these? So this node, and then also shift click and grab this node over here. I wonder if I could then come up here and do an option to join these together. Yes, we have these join curves, and so now boom, we can see we put that back together. Now it's a little wonky here, so I might come in here and delete one of these points, and then come in here and remember, use that Alt trick to change this back to a smooth point, and then get it back to a smooth point. So we have options here, but again, I'm doing this all under the node tool because I feel like it is just easier than using the pen tool. Now, if you want to know what the reverse curve option is here, by default right now, I started creating this right here. And so now if I add another point to this curve here, so let me just come back to the pen tool now. And if I click on the pen tool and I put down another point, let's make sure I have this curve selected. So there we go, it's selected. If I put down another point here, oops, remember when you're trying to add to existing curve, sometimes you have to hold down that control. You got to get this black arrow, click on it. Now, if I'm adding a point now, we're adding to the end of this. Let me hit Control Z to undo that. What if I were to first hit this reverse curve option? So again, here under the actions menu, but I can also go in under the node tool. And so it's going to do the same thing. If I come under the node tool now and we just come and reverse the curve, we see now the arrow's on the other end. And suddenly if I add a new point, I'm adding to the opposite end. So I can also demonstrate that under the pen tool. So let me hit Control Z to undo that. Let's go back to the pen tool. We're wanting to add to this. So remember, let's hit Control to make sure we are adding to this. Right now, if I put on a new point, it's going to be on this end. However, if I come in under that action menu and we reverse the curve, see how the arrow's at the other end, and see how now we're adding to the other end of the curve. So that just lets you control what sort of the start and the end of the curve is and where you're going to be adding your next point. Okay, so most of these are pretty self-explanatory, but again, I usually find the node tool to be more effective and easier to work with than working with the pen tool. And again, the best way to get a handle for some of these settings is just to play around a little bit and start to learn what things do. Hey, thanks for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. If so, feel free to like, subscribe, share, do all the things. And for the absolute best way of staying up to date on Canva, Affinity, all things entrepreneur related, feel free to sign up for my free email newsletter. I'll have that pinned in the first comment down below. Thanks again for watching. Hope to see you soon.
Everything I do so instinctive and so passionate. Every word I move so descriptive like an adjective. I got a vendetta against people who patented being negative when you should be getting after it. I got facts over tracks, this and that. Spitting slow, spitting fast. I could roast, I could gas. Think I'm okay at last, but I don't know if that can erase all the past.